everyone, and welcome to another installment of TED Excellence, the show in which we seek truth, justice, and the Lunarian way. And I come to you live from my Corona bunker on the moon with Dog Cat Fox, a Pepperjack, and all of you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Saturday. Serendipitous Saturday. Yes, we return to the wonderful world of TEDx, where we will learn something today about justice or legality or courtrooms or something. I don't know. We'll discuss that in a moment. But who is here to join me on this adventure today? Why, that would be Matt Barnes. Hello. Asian Hippie. Hello. Mr. Tickle Trunk. Hello. Raziel. Hello. George Mason. Hello. Jaeger Pony. Hello. Tall Person. Hello. 2002 Chrysler PT Cruiser Woody. Hello. Willett Forge. Hello. Merle Davis. Hello. Zeke Weiss. Hello. Sean Hooley. Hello. Eric Grunstatter. Hello. St. Michael. Hello. Somnamnul Nation. Hello. Killer Turnus. Hello. Who's next? Dina B. Hello. Chicago Mike. Hello. Black Belt for Christ. Hello. Keeverdam. Hello. And then I see people I've already said. Spittlebuggies, hello. Mike R, hello. Jose Chacon, hello. Green Death, hello. And then chat jump because, of course, it did. Just Paul, hello. Puddock, hello. Bio Tenki, hello. Robert Pincus, hello. Healer Owned Healer, hello. And this is Kyle. Thank you so much. Hello, chat people and scribbles. Hello, Kyle. A Scanner Daftly, hello. I think I got everybody up to this point. So with that, I'll just move on to the regular intro. Yes. What do we have today? Well, I picked this one out for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, this was recorded in 2019, so it's not exactly new, but there's a couple of aspects to it that caught my attention. One, it had very few views on it. I'm thinking it was under 1,000. I don't have the image in my head right now, but it was under 1,000. And at least at the time that I grabbed it, which was just yesterday or whatever, no comments, which I found surprising. The other aspects to it are, A, it's in Seattle, and the speaker is a former prosecutor, I believe, in or from Seattle. And the reason I find that significant is because if you haven't seen the documentaries on the deterioration of Seattle and the surrounding area that have been put out by a news station there in the last couple of years. There's one called Seattle is Dying, and the one they just put out recently is it's like Fighting to Save the Soul of Seattle or something like that. It's close to. But anyway, the important aspect of the most recent documentary that I found interesting, and which is why I was interested in this particular talk, is because they spend a lot of time talking about how the prosecutor's office, either in Seattle or the county thereof, has been changing their philosophy on what counts as a crime worth prosecuting. And it's kind of disturbing, some of the standards that they're... Admittedly, it is from the perspective of that one documentary, so, you know, it's a single source kind of thing, but they provide enough examples that it's worrisome, at least for, I assume, Seattle, especially after the Chaz Chop thing this past summer. It's a very interesting place, Seattle. It looks like it's kind of a microcosm petri dish testing site for a lot of the initiatives and a lot of the philosophy seeing pop up all over the place, but it's all centered in this one town. And I think it's interesting to take a look at what's actually driving the administrative philosophy there. This might be an aspect of that. I don't know this guy's particular story, save for the fact that in the little buzz thing, it gave us the information that he was a former prosecutor, I believe. But anyway, that's all preamble. What is it called? Well, the title is, as you can see there, Why We Need More Equity in Courtrooms. This also grabbed my attention because equity, for those of you who are wordsmiths, is essentially a synonym for justice. And that by itself might be okay, except that, again, in the little summary capsule of the talk, they compare and contrast equity with equality. And every time I see equity contrasted with equality, I'm assuming they mean equity in the sense of equality of outcome. Now, that concept alone in the courtroom isn't necessarily a bad thing, because usually you want people to, if two people go in with the exact same crime having been committed, they end up with the exact same punishment. Now, is it ever the case that two people committing the exact same crime on the books end up getting the same punishment? Not necessarily, because there are always extenuating factors. There's always other things going on. So, what is our speaker talking about? I don't know, but we'll find out. Thank you, Brittany Holland. Thank you so much for the Pepper Jack Fund. It seems this is going to be one that requires a drink or two. Maybe. Or it could be something that I fundamentally agree with. I don't know. But we will find out together. I'm suspicious of the word equity. I'm always expecting something to the effect of restorative justice to be brought up when we talk about legalese in TEDx's, but I'm open to being surprised. With all that as preamble, start off with a few seconds for sound test. You guys tell me if you can hear this. Thank you, tall person. Happy National Fig Newton Day. Also, when discussed on Lords of the Night, please don't say how many bingos you get. I tend to miss these and want to be surprised. Oh, that is a good point. Okay, I will try to make sure not to do any more spoilers on bingos in the future. Thank you, tall person. Also, speaking of which, today's bingo card is card C. C as in courtroom. Aha, you see how I brought that back around to the show itself? There you go. C as in courtroom. Links to the bingo cards are in the description below, so get yours ready. And with that, here we go. I said here we go.
16 years ago, Edwin was sitting in a car on the side of the road.
16 years ago, Edwin was sitting in a car on the side of the road. Okay. I am preparing myself for the story of Edwin. You guys hear that? Asian Hippie says sounds good. Matt Barnes says sounds good. Mike R says sounds all right. Matt Barnes, or sorry, Mike R, you need to get on the same page with everybody else. It sounds good. All right. I work so hard and it's only all right. Anyway. All right. So Edwin's on the side of the road. And then?
Edwin was an alcoholic.
Uh-huh.
Been drinking. Now he was smoking weed with a friend.
Well, I got 1 out of 2 ain't bad on this one. Well, not the alcoholic part, but I mean, I'm drinking Dr. Pepper.
As they sat there just hanging out, a cop walked up.
Okay.
He saw the window was open. He decided to see what was going on.
Uh-huh.
So he walked up and leaned on that open window.
Okay. I don't think that's really usual police procedure, but stranger things have happened, I guess.
Edwin panicked. He floored it.
Okay. That was a bad decision on Edwin's part right there. Yeah, all right. And then?
The cop had to grab onto the window to keep from getting run over. And somehow that cop managed to hang on until Edwin had finally stopped.
Wow. He had to hang on to the window to stop from getting run. Okay. Okay, well, he's leaning on the window and he's putting it down. Okay, I guess I could see that. Thank you, Lady Gopher, for the Dog Cat Fox. Happy smiley Dog Cat Fox. Thank you, Lady Gopher. Okay, so leaning into the window, guy floors it. He hangs on because otherwise he's going to fall under the wheel probably. And then Edwin stops. Okay.
Edwin was charged, and he was charged by a prosecutor like me.
I'm not at all surprised. Driving under the influence and also, vehicular assault could also be the other. Tell me what he was charged with. I'm just curious.
The law was clear for what he was facing. He was facing felony assault on a police officer.
Yeah, he really was, wasn't he?
He was looking at DUI, resisting arrest, reckless endangerment, possession of drugs, possession of drug paraphernalia.
Yeah, well, given your story, that sounds all completely reasonable, doesn't it? I assume there's a twist coming.
Edwin was years in prison.
Yeah.
And this is where most people say all the prosecutor wants to do is step in and get that max.
I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, we have an adversarial system, criminal justice system. I mean, depending on the circumstances, either they come to an agreement, a plea deal, or they go to trial and put the risk of the way with it. Given the overwhelmed nature of our criminal justice system, prosecutors are more likely to go for a plea deal rather than clog up the system with unnecessary trials if an agreement can be reached. At least that is my understanding. So no, I don't believe that all prosecutors are looking for the max necessarily. It all depends on the circumstances of the crime and also on what the defendant chooses to do in regards to filing a plea or going to trial. So that's just my commentary. Uh-oh, I'm roboting a bit. Uh-oh. Am I still roboting, guys? I apologize. I will pause until I get some good news from people. Scribe good for me, but the TED was skipping before. Okay, well, if it continues to screw up, I might have to start this again another time. Not at the moment. I don't hear any roboting, says Debatefly. Okay, well, I'll just summarize what I said before. He said most people think prosecutors are looking to get the maximum sentence. I just said that in most cases, prosecutors are probably looking for a plea deal rather than trying to clog up the court system any further. So I don't immediately go to the idea that prosecutors are out for the maximum sentence, depending on the circumstances. Okay.
Not Edwin's prosecutor. Edwin's prosecutor recognized that the real issue here was addiction. So instead of sending Edwin to prison for 10 years, he set up a plan for treatment. And he set up a plan to hold Edwin accountable for following through with that treatment.
Okay. Well, if that was in the prosecutor's purview, then so be it. I don't inherently have anything against diversionary programs. I've said this on several shows before. Okay, so the prosecutor had that option. And
because he did that, as of September 21st, Edwin's been sober for 16 years.
Great. Okay, yeah. I mean, if our arguing for the possibility of diversionary programs in as a supplementary option to criminal sentencing or something, like I say, I don't inherently have an argument against that. It all depends on the circumstances. I think there'd be a limit, obviously, and there should be conditions. But okay, this might be a boring TEDx, guys.
Edwin even went back and worked in that court where he was once a defendant as a mentor for other people that needed that second chance.
Good for him.
And now I tell this story first because it's a great example of what prosecutors can do when they focus on the person instead of just the crime.
Yeah. Okay.
It's something that's still too rare across the country today.
Uh-huh.
But I also tell this story because Edwin is my uncle.
Oh, so this would be a childhood-only anecdote then. Great. Circling free space and childhood or family anecdote. Also, guys, as a reminder for those that came in late, we are on bingo card C. C as in courthouse. So free space, childhood or family anecdote. Moving on.
And his story, his experience convinced me that the problem with our criminal justice system is that we are too focused on equality. Now, I get it. That's
okay. He's about to say that sounds like a contradiction or something. That sounds weird. Yeah, it does. You're going to have to explain yourself.
We are too focused on equality.
Yep.
Now, I get it. That's a weird thing to say. Who comes to a TEDx event and says that we need less equality?
Oh, my friend, you have not attended many TEDx talks. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. As a longtime veteran, I can tell you, it is entirely common to hear that. As my audience is probably doing right now, laughing along with me as he says that. Oh, we know much better than our speaker does, don't we? Yes, we do.
Equality is fundamental to who we are as Americans, fundamental to who we are as people.
But
And nowhere is that more true than the criminal justice system.
But
in the criminal justice system, we have the saying, justice is blind. And it's the idea that no matter who someone is, race, gender, wealth, religion, no matter who someone is, when they get into the courtroom, they will be treated the same.
Procedurally, possibly. But here's the thing. And it's not a very happy fact, but it's a true fact. Extenuating circumstances, different minds in different juries, different minds in different judges. The justice system is operated by people, and people are varied as grains of sand. So, yes, the system has certain things in place, certain prerogatives, certain powers that are imparted upon the judges and the prosecutors and the juries and so on. What they choose to do in regards to those powers is going to vary. It is inevitable. You can put two people, or you can take the same person with all the same facts. You could play out the exact same trial with every word, every gesture, everything being exactly the same in two different trials with a different judge in each and a different jury in each. And more likely than not, you will reach two different outcomes. That's the best we've got. That's the best we've come so far. Thank you, the Redneck Ram. Hello, Scribbles. Just getting here, and I am invoking the power of Lexi. So start over. No? Okay, guess I'll watch from the start. The power of Lexi. Is that what it is now? Like Lexi has the power of the time stone? Just start over again? Rewind time? Is that it? Lexi is the time master? Okay. All right. Lexi Mads, time master. Mads with power. There's probably a comic book cover in there somewhere, but anyway.
Powerful idea, but the reality is that society is not blind.
It's not society you have to worry about. It's the judge, the jury, the prosecutor. And in almost every case, you're going to have variance in each, even for cases that have the exact same circumstances. The law and the penalties therein can be applied as these different parties see fit, depending on the circumstances and depending on their opinions at the moment. It's never going to be equal. It's never going to be exactly the same. Short of there being mandatory minimums or things like that, which a lot of people aren't fond of, and I'm not necessarily fond of either. 3 strikes you're outlaws and things where there is no ability to apply your own judgment. You're always going to have different outcomes. It's just the way it is.
So when we make decisions in the criminal justice system, those end up having ripple effects throughout society.
Well, that's called precedent, possibly, but okay.
And we get to decide in the criminal justice system if we want to amplify the status quo of how society already is, or if we want to try to change it.
So you are an activist, then. You're using the law to change society. That's your agenda. I thought, okay, well, maybe I'm just an idealist, but anyway. Thank you, Dark Resurrect. Howdy, Scribbles and chat hooligans. Hello, Dark Resurrect. Yes, Mr. Tickle Trunk, systemic, institutional, sure. Criminal justice system and so on, that's kind of inherent. Take that. In fact, let's go over the card real quick just to refresh ourselves. Marginalization. Not yet, but we might get there. Collectivize its own demographic. Well, he hasn't said it yet, I don't think, but I know, or at least from the capsule, that he either is or was a prosecutor. So if he, again, first off, he has to mention that he's a prosecutor or was one. Then he has to start talking about we as prosecutors or something like that. Then I'll circle that one. Leaves out vital context. Not yet. Feminism, no. Microaggressions, unconscious bias. Unconscious bias, either specifically or implicitly, he'll get there. That, I think that's part of his argument here. Anecdote that probably never happened. I believe the story of his uncle. I don't have any reason not to. Contradicts own point or argument. Not yet. Diversity and inclusion. No, not yet. Attempt to coin new buzzword, buzz phrase. No. Plays victim. Not yet. Word salad. No. Mind reading assumes motives. Not yet. Benevolent condescension. No. A list. Not yet. Patriarchy. No. Wage gap. No. Privilege. Not yet. I'm assuming it might get there. Self-vilification or prejudice. No. Equity. He hasn't said it yet, but we're going to get there probably. I don't like the title of the presentation necessarily as part of the bingo card, because the people who run the YouTube channel can change that. Weightless example, not yet. Make something about race, sex, etc. for no reason, not yet. White supremacy, no. Dr. Keeve, scribe light, self-vilification, a prosecutor like me. Oh, he did? Okay. Okay. Yep. Collectivizes own demographics. Circle in that one. Thank you, Dr. Keeve. I missed that part. And here we go.
Rather than equality, to truly pursue justice, we need to pursue equity.
And equity is on the board. Circling equity. And there we go. Now that you've said we don't want equality, we need equity, you need to define your terms. What do you mean? Because equity is synonymous with the word justice. So what do you mean?
But what does that actually mean?
Well, that's what I'm asking you.
What's the difference between equity and equality?
That's what I'm asking you.
Not just a lawyer's semantics. Equality is the idea that we treat people the same.
Well, yes. I mean, egalitarian-wise, equality of opportunity-wise. That's kind of how I think of it. Okay. You're being a little vague on it, but all right.
Equity is the idea that we treat people differently.
No. Not even by definition. What?
So at your office, equality says that everyone chips in the same amount.
Yeah.
Equity says that the CEO is going to pay because she's the one that has the status and the money.
No. That is literally not the case. Not even by the definition of what?
It's straightforward when you put it like that, right?
Yeah, it's straightforward when you put it like that. So you want equity in the courtroom. So instead of the defendant serving time in jail, you give the time in jail to the retired person in the room because they have more time to waste in jail than the defendant. What? The power and the status and the money? What?
So in criminal justice, it's a little more complicated.
Yeah. Okay. Give me an active example of how you go from the boss paying for the donuts is equity to the criminal justice system.
But equality says that we look just at the facts of the crime and we make sentences based on those facts.
Well, kind of. Thank you, Chicago Mike. This is the first time I can see the difference between lawyer talk and English major talk. This guy's already floored me. I'm getting ready to circle word salad because, okay, I haven't circled contradicts own point yet because he has to give us an active example in criminal justice that equates to the boss paying for the donuts. I want to see him try to get there. Thank you, Matt Barnes. That point was clear as mud. Yeah, it really was. So I'm on the edge of circling word salad, and I'm on the edge of circling contradicts own pointer argument. If he's trying to redefine the concept of equity here, he's going to have to work really hard. Okay, so give us the criminal justice equivalent of the boss paying for the donuts.
Equity says that we look at the facts of the crime, but we also look at the individual defendant and victim and community in that case.
Okay. You ever seen those shows where they have character witnesses? You ever seen those shows that have the defendants or the defense attorneys presenting extenuating circumstances? This person was abused as a child. This person has a learning disability, that kind of thing. We already do that, sir. The community, I'm not quite sure how that fits in. That is just about leaching into restorative justice territory, but regardless, we do take into account the person's circumstances, the circumstances of the crime, the motive. And after conviction or pre-sentencing, oftentimes the situation of the defendant is taken into consideration. It may or may not sway the judge or the jury in their sentencing recommendations or eventual decision, but we do have that as part of our criminal justice system. So I don't know what you're talking about as though this is some kind of new concept. Now, admittedly, caveat, I am not a lawyer. I am not a criminal justice expert. Maybe he's going to say something that will better clarify what he's talking about. But again, I'm 2 steps away from circling word salad and also contradicts own pointer argument, because I don't see how the boss paying for the donut, or that'll be weightless example. That might be weightless example instead. But the boss paying for the donuts and assessing someone's punishment on the basis of their personal situation, it doesn't click.
And equality is premised on the idea that good comes from consistency, while equity is premised on the idea that good comes from making that defendant and victim and community better off at the end of the process than they were at the beginning.
Making the victim better off and the defendant better off. Yeah, we're getting into restorative justice territory here. Thank you, Chicago Mike, again. He's describing empathy and not equity. Yes, very good. That's a good way to put it. He's taking us into restorative justice territory here. So, as with all restorative justice speeches or pitches, I can only hope that, at least for clarification's sake, if nothing else, he gives us even a hypothetical of a situation where you have a serial rapist or a murderer. How does this apply to those things? Or if he says this only applies for certain severity of crimes and below the line where this is supposed to apply, well, he'll be going far further than most other advocates for restorative justice that I've looked at. But he needs to give us an active example of what he's talking about and how it compares to the real world. And he has to give us the most extreme case, because if he doesn't, he's not making a good argument. Thank you, Lancelot 652. What if the victim is dead? Well, that's what I'm talking about. What if we're talking about a murderer? What if we're talking about a rapist? You have to give us the most extreme example if this is what you're proposing for the criminal justice system, unless you set a limit. So let's see.
This is something that isn't just true in criminal justice or in donuts. This is something that every parent has had to deal with. I still remember being a kid, sitting in the back of the minivan, whining to no end about how my brother got something that I hadn't gotten.
Right. So you want equality of outcome, right? Right.
How unfair that was.
Yeah. You know why? Because life isn't fair. I don't know if you're aware of that.
And I remember my mom saying, fair doesn't mean equal.
That is true. Yeah, it's a quality of opportunity, not a quality of outcome. Since you're not going to tell us the circumstances of whatever your brother got that you didn't get, and so on. Yeah.
Yet somehow I forgot my mom's wisdom when I was a couple months onto the job as a prosecutor.
So wait. Fair doesn't mean equal. You're complaining that people in the criminal justice system shouldn't be treated in lockstep, right? Which they're not, because you already intimated that different outcomes happen for different people. But you're admitting to the fact that fair doesn't always mean equal. Okay. I'm gonna try to keep my head on straight here, because I think he's just crossed over his own point about twice now, if I'm not mistaken.
I know she's probably mortified to hear I'm not always thinking about her wisdom.
She could be mortified for other reasons. I don't know.
So I had two cases that were pretty much the same on their face.
Pretty much the same. Got it.
They're both DUIs.
Yeah.
Both guys, Carlos and Jeremy, had gotten pulled over. They were weaving. They failed their field test. They blew a .12 on the breathalyzer, 50% over the legal limit.
Okay. Thank you, Dark Resurrect. When did this notion of life needs to be fair become a religious dogma? Like it's a nice idea, but life was never meant to be fair or easy. I don't know. Like I said, it's the new definition of equity. Equity is equality of outcome, where everybody gets exactly the same no matter what, whether they're deserving of it or not, and so on. He's not talking about equality of outcome, though. He's talking about now fair doesn't necessarily mean equal. So I'm not quite sure where he's going with this at this point. I thought he was going one direction, then he crossed over himself, and then did it again. But at least, okay, now he's got a couple of examples, cases that are, quote unquote, pretty much the same, which doesn't help his argument, but okay, moving on.
So it was pretty obvious that they were guilty. There was no question about that.
Okay.
But these are two very different people.
Right. So are you going to apply the law equally to them? Or are you going to play favorites?
Jeremy works at a tech company. He makes well into figures.
So what?
Carlos is an undocumented immigrant. He works odd jobs to try to make ends meet.
So what?
So we have the same crime, the same facts, but we have two totally different people.
Yes, and so you applied the law equally to both of them. Yes, Mr. Prosecutor?
And as a justice system, we need to decide what to do with that.
And so you applied the law equally to both of them because their class and their personal finances and so on are irrelevant before the law. Right, Mr. Prosecutor?
Under the typical approach, we would give them the same sentence.
Yes, the typical approach of applying the law fairly. Unless you're about to tell us that there were some extenuating circumstances to that particular incident, like if Carlos wasn't actively driving the car but was just caught behind the wheel parked somewhere versus the first guy was driving down the freeway, then maybe you could give different circumstances. If the cop didn't actually see someone operating the car. But you're not talking about that. Are you going to punish the one guy more harshly because he's got a good job? Okay, thank you, Dark Resurrect. Justice was blind. People are giving her sight. Yeah. Okay, Mr. Prosecutor. So you have two men, each committed the exact same offense. The circumstances of their employment is irrelevant to the crime committed. What did you choose to do?
So they'd both get that DUI conviction.
Yes.
That day in jail, at least.
Yes.
And hundreds of dollars in fines.
Yes.
But think about what that sentence, what that actually does to these two different people.
Okay, I'm thinking about it. Oh, are they treated equally under the law, regardless of their position in society?
Jeremy's going to be fine.
Is he? Really? Okay, mind reading assumes motives. Circling that one. You don't know shit, dude, about what Jeremy's going to be. A DUI conviction? Losing his license potentially, losing his job potentially, and on and on and on. Who knows what other consequences there might be to that? But no, you know already that Jeremy's going to be fine, but because he has a tech job? Oh, okay. Okay.
He's going to pay his lawyer. He'll pay the court costs. He will even pay to spend that day in jail in a nicer jail in the suburbs, because that is a real thing that you can do here in King County.
It doesn't matter. So what did you choose to do? Oh, wise prosecutor.
Carlos is going to have it a little tougher.
Yeah, gosh, I can't imagine why. Probably because he was already here illegally, breaking federal law, driving without a license, unless he was granted a license in some kind of state program or something. So, yeah, there's the other question. Was Carlos even legally behind the wheel license-wise if he's an undocumented immigrant or an illegal immigrant? For those of us that, don't want to bandy about with words or people's feelings. Tell me more about Carlos's situation and how you took pity on somebody who was already breaking the law before they got the DUI.
Carlos is going to have trouble paying those fines.
Well, he should have thought about that before he decided to drive while intoxicated.
He's likely going to be paying the court instead of paying for rent or food or health care.
Well, he should have thought about that before getting behind the wheel intoxicated and putting his and other people's lives at risk. I don't know. Bad choices lead to bad outcomes.
Carlos may face consequences at work or may have a harder time finding work.
Oh, and Jason wouldn't have? Jason's going to be fine? There's nothing in his contract at his work about arrests or character clauses or anything, morals clauses. But you already know that. You already know that Jason's going to be fine, right? Okay.
Because in his jobs, that conviction can be a disqualifier.
In his jobs, how is he working legally if he's not here legally? The people that would hire him probably don't care about his legal record because he doesn't have one as an illegal resident.
And Carlos, because he's an undocumented immigrant, might even get deported.
Well, you know what? Carlos should have thought about that before breaking federal law. If you enter a country illegally, you are rolling the dice of eventually being ejected from that country legally. None of this has anything to do with him getting behind the wheel while intoxicated. But you tell me, what decisions did you come to in punishing these two men who each committed the same crime?
So while Jeremy is going back to work at this tech company, Carlos might get deported from the only country that he has ever known.
Okay, and I got it wrong. I called the guy Jason, not Jeremy earlier. J names. That is not your problem. Unless there are extenuating circumstances to the crime, You apply the law equally. So because you see Carlos as what? A charity case? What did you decide to do? Tell me. What did you decide to do, oh prosecutor?
That's justice.
What? What is?
When justice is defined as equality.
Applying the law equally is not a bad thing. It is supposedly, it tries to be, the equalizer in our society. The rich man who commits murder is not above the law any more than the poor man who commits murder. So are you going to tell me that you're going to actively or activistly flip the scales of assumption and now put Carlos above the law compared to Jeremy because you feel sorry for Carlos?
The reasonable question then becomes, what does equity get us? Could equity actually do anything different for us?
Okay, I'm circling word salad because he's making absolutely no sense. I'm circling weightless example for the donut story because that makes absolutely no sense. I'm holding off on contradicting own point or argument because I want to hear more. But for reference, on the bingo card, we have circled collectivize his own demographic, word salad, mind reading assumes motives, free space, systemic institutional, childhood or family anecdote, equity, and weightless example. Let's see, Mr. Ticker, Scribe Light, he contradicted himself earlier. You even said that, LOL, but didn't circle. I know. I want to hear more of the fullness of his argument. We'll come back to that eventually. That's vital to this presentation, really. It really is. Thank you, Corey Suzuki. Speaker should not be an occupation card, please. I know. I took that square out a long time ago. It was way, way, way too subjective. So let's see. He also made a list at the 255 mark, Scribelight. What was the list, Keyword Am? I'm not disbelieving you. I mean, my brain has been all over the place with this one. So what list did he make at 255? What was his list? Remind me. Let's see. 255 counted gender, race, religion on his fingers. Oh, that's right. You're correct. Okay, circling a list. And at the end of this story, if we don't get benevolent condescension for whatever he decides to do between Jeremy and Carlos, I'll be surprised.
And the solution there is that equity comes from looking at what we're actually trying to achieve as a system.
You're trying to stop people and disincentivize people from breaking the law?
So in criminal justice, we're trying to get community safety. We're trying to get accountability. We're trying to make sure that we stay legitimate as a system. So legitimacy comes from being fair to everyone who comes through the court system.
And so you applied the law fairly here because the circumstances of the crimes were the same. Not the circumstances of the person's personal life. Unless you have some argument to say that the circumstances of their personal life at the time the crime was committed should play a role in assessing punishment. But you haven't said that. You've talked about the circumstances of their lives that existed before the crime even occurred, and your assumptions of their condition after they've been arrested. Are you going to tell us what you did?
And comes from upholding society's standards and values.
Yes, that no one is above the law, maybe? Thank you, God of Plague. Law not applied equally loses the public support. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? I mean, imagine the scenario that I'm sure okay, I don't want to assume motives either, but we often hear that, white person commits crime, black person commits same crime, black person gets heavier sentence. Okay, that doesn't make anybody happy. That doesn't make society better. A man commits crime, woman commits exact same crime, woman gets lesser sentence. That doesn't make anybody happy either. Okay, either the law is applied evenly, or at least as evenly as possible. And if it's not, there's extenuating circumstances that are articulable and understandable by any reasonable person, or at least can be entertained by a reasonable person, even if you don't agree with them. But our speaker sounds like he's going to, quote unquote, flip the script and go easy on somebody because he feels sorry for their situation, a situation that is of their own making.
So for Carlos and Jeremy, if we're trying to send that message that they need to take this seriously, that they will literally pay for what they've done because this is something that endangered the community, but Carlos makes $30,000 a year.
That doesn't matter. If you're going to start assessing criminal punishment on the basis of someone's bank balance, wow. Right, dog, cat, fox? Wowie, wow, wow. I just, thank you, Frosted Glass. Commits murder, I better quit my well-paying job. Yeah. I'm going to back up a little bit because I have a feeling a migraine's about to explode in my brain.
For what they've done, because this is something that endangered the community. But Carlos makes $30,000 a year, and Jeremy makes $300,000. Don't we need different fines to send that message and get their attention?
No. Mr. Tickletrunk says wage gap. You are correct. This is an instance where wage gap is an argument point. It's not the gender wage gap, but all the same. Okay. So what did you decide to do? This is all lead up. I want to know what you decided to do, oh, Mr. Prosecutor.
I said as I started this that I regretted how I handled this case.
Oh, okay.
Or at least that I didn't follow my mom's wisdom, which should be one and the same.
Fair is not always equal. Uh-huh.
I didn't go with equity here. I went with equality.
Yes, everyone exists under the law.
And I couldn't stand the idea of Carlos being deported, potentially being deported.
That was Carlos's choice. He was in that state of risk before you ever came across him. He made that choice years ago. Or, and he hasn't said, but I will admit to this possibility, either that or Carlos is the victim of his parents' choices. I don't know what to tell you otherwise.
Well, Jeremy went back to work. So I did reduce their charges. No.
You reduced their, what, both of them?
Day in jail, lower fines, fewer immigration consequences for Carlos.
Wait. Thank you, Dark Resurrect. Thing is, the prosecution can put forward the same amount of a fine. It is the judge's job to determine if it is fair. Well, yeah. Hold on. I got to back up. So wait. Because Carlos would be hurt more, you reduce the charges for both? So Jeremy gets an easier time of it because you felt sorry for Carlos. Is that what I'm hearing?
Carlos being deported, potentially being deported, while Jeremy went back to work. So I did reduce their charges. No day in jail, lower fines, fewer immigration consequences for Carlos.
What? So Jeremy gets off easy, gets a slap on the wrist because you felt sorry for Carlos. Why should Jeremy get a slap on the wrist? Why should Carlos get a slap on the wrist? I mean, I guess I'll give you credit for treating them equally under the law and the prerogatives that you had as a prosecutor, but Your logic makes absolutely no sense. Carlos's life choices are not extenuating circumstances to Jeremy's crime, nor are they extenuating circumstances to Carlos's crime. What?
But I did that for both of them. And because I did that for both of them, I think Jeremy took this less seriously. He took this as a slap on the wrist.
It was a slap on the wrist. It was a slap on the wrist to both of them. It wasn't just a slap on the wrist to Jeremy. You think Jeremy committed a lesser crime or a greater crime than Carlos? You think Carlos is somehow, what, less arrogant than Jeremy? I'm circling benevolent condescension. And if you can believe it.
Bingo.
What? Of course!
Come on, man. I'm pulling a Joe Biden here. Come on. You know what Jeremy's thinking. You know Jeremy's in this position of power that you're so angry at. You know that he's an arrogant snob versus Carlos, the poor, downtrodden, innocent individual who's in the country illegally and driving without a license, probably, and driving under the influence, the same as Jeremy. But, Carlos is going to see this as a mercy, whereas Jeremy's going to see this as not taking it seriously. You think Carlos is going to take it any more seriously for the same crime he committed as Jeremy? Wow. Jeez Louise. Thank you, Matt Barnes. We, the jury, find the prosecutor guilty of not having a leg to stand on via bingo. Yeah. This guy's making me mad. This guy was a prosecutor? Okay, if this is how he adjudicated, well, insofar as a prosecutor can, these two cases, I can't even imagine how many other ridiculous decisions he made along the way in other possibly more serious situations.
So he's more likely to drive drunk again.
You don't know that. You are not a mind reader. Jeremy's tax bracket does not define his character, nor does Carlos's documentation status define his character. But either way, that's not your problem. What, you doing some Minority Report kind of stuff here? Well, Jeremy's going to feel a certain way about this, so I better not let him get away with it. Oh, except there's Carlos there. Gosh. And I can't be looking like I'm playing favorite, so Jeremy, you get off with a slap on the wrist, same as Carlos, but Carlos deserves it more. What? Thank you, Bacall, the Driving Ape Man. I must have missed a doozy of a talk. Oh, we're still in it. Oh, we're still stuck in it. We're still there.
If I had pursued equity instead of equality, I could have had an outcome that was both more just and more effective.
More just. Two men commit the exact same crime. Their life circumstances are irrelevant. At no point did you bring up anything about their life circumstances being involved with or acting as extenuating circumstances to the crime that was committed. They are irrelevant. A rich man committing murder is no different than a poor man committing murder if their tax brackets had nothing to do with the crime and didn't somehow alleviate their motivation or the circumstances around it. You decided to play judge based on your assumption of someone's social standing and your assumption of their attitude towards society or the rule of law, where you have someone who is actively breaking federal law by being in the country illegally, and someone that at no point did you mention he had a prior record. So if I had to judge the character of these two people based solely on their actions and decisions, well, legal assessment, but apparently that doesn't mean anything to you. Wow. Prosecutor, huh? Okay.
We should acknowledge that this isn't just about taking it easy on people who have had it rough.
This is exactly what you just argued. You just argued that. That was the entire basis of this whole journey we went on with this anecdote. Contradicting own point or argument. I'm circling that one. And you know what that means, guys.
Ooh, that's a bingo.
Right?
Yeah!
Holy cats. Are you kidding me, dude? We just spent the last 6 or 7 minutes with you building up to this and saying that you should have assessed a different punishment for both men. And the only thing you brought up to distinguish them one from another was their circumstances in tax bracket, in earnings. Thank you, Matt Barnes. Have my eyes gone crossed, or did he not practice that which he's talking about on Carlos and Jeremy making this mood? Oh, yeah, no, yep. Contradicts own point or argument. Just boom, right there. Shot it all in the foot. This entire presentation is effectively null and void at this moment. But we still have minutes to go, so let's see if he digs himself even further.
In fact, equity often means more work.
Oh, okay.
Let's see how many people here can relate to Lamont.
Lamont. Okay, cut him off here. How many people can relate to Lamont? All right, well, tell us about Lamont.
In fact, equity often means more work.
Okay.
Let's see how many people here can relate to Lamont. Lamont's a 15-year-old I worked with this year. He came across my desk in juvie.
15-year-old juvenile offender. Okay.
How many people here have ever shoplifted? Don't raise your hands.
Uh-huh. So Lamont shoplifted. I'm assuming.
This is on video. I'm a prosecutor.
Statute of limitations.
It was too late for you. I'm sorry. So Lamont had shoplifted too.
Okay. Lamont, 15-year-old minor shoplifter. Okay.
And when a kid in King County shoplifts a couple times, that case will get to my desk.
I don't know how prosecutions work in Washington or King County or whatever. So I guess he handles juvenile offenders too. I don't know how it works. Okay.
Typically, it's easy. We resolve it pretty quickly. Something like 6 months probation, 20 hours community service, something like that.
Okay. For a 15-year-old, it's fine, if that.
But for Lamont, his problem wasn't really shoplifting.
Oh.
Just like Edwin's problem was really addiction.
Yeah, Edwin's problem was addiction, but addiction didn't make him put his foot on the pedal and drive away with a cop hanging off the side of his car. I mean, for all the positive outcomes to Edwin's diversionary program, okay.
Even though he committed a crime of violence.
Yeah, that's the thing. And Edwin is very, 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 very lucky that he had that opportunity in contrast to jail time. So, yeah, like I say, I'm not against diversionary programs. It all depends on the circumstances, but okay.
So for Lamont, he was skipping school more days than not. He was using alcohol and weed daily, even as a 15-year-old. He had mental health issues. And the guys that he got caught shoplifting with had already racked up some serious violent felonies.
Okay, so you have a minor committing a crime in the company of older kids who already have criminal records at the time the crime was committed. So a minor who themselves, isn't allowed to sign a contract without a legal guardian and so on and so forth. So diminished capacity, under duress. There's a whole bunch of things here that are mitigating factors in the commission of the crime. So if it was it as a first offense, I mean, okay.
So for Lamont, how do we get to legitimacy and accountability and community safety?
Well, you just said maybe probation and some community service. I mean, I don't know. What was your alternative in this shoplifting case?
It started by recognizing that we needed to treat Lamont as an individual.
What does that mean?
Not just the embodiment of his crime.
What does that mean?
By doing that, we put together a plan for mental health counseling. We put together a plan for drug and alcohol treatment, a plan for a mentor that could actually relate to him, because this mentor had gone through the same things that Lamont was now going through.
Okay, well, you know what? For juvenile offenders, that's a whole different world, and I don't have any problem with that. Treating juveniles the same way you would treat adults, depending on the circumstances, is not always the right way to go. So if you can get this kid out of the habits that he's already fallen into, if you can get him help for his problems, which are obviously adult-level problems when he's still a minor, fine. And again, I'm not an expert. I'm not a legal expert. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know any of this stuff. If that is some rare assessment of how you treat juvenile offenders, then, hey, I'm all for it. You know, because if there's one place you can start to guide someone away from the worst possible choices in their long-term life, it's when they're a kid. So, great. I don't have a problem with that. A shoplifting charge for a minor? Yeah, okay. Fine.
So we were asking a lot of Lamont.
Yeah. Well, that was the point, wasn't it? To build character, to build discipline, to try to change his outlook on his sense of self-worth. I mean, Lamont has to do the work to make Lamont's life better. You can't just hand him a better life. You hand him the opportunity to change his circumstances.
We were asking way more than someone who has to do 6 months of supervision and 20 hours of community service.
Okay.
And in order to get him to do that, to agree to that higher sentence, I used my leverage as a prosecutor to take that conviction off his record, to say that he would never get that conviction as long as he followed this plan.
Right. So you put him on a diversionary program, and you held at risk having a criminal conviction on his record. That's no different than most diversionary programs that I've heard of, whether they're for juveniles or adults. And yeah, the onus is on him to take responsibility for himself and his life and his future. Yeah, okay, good. Again, is this revolutionary or something? I mean, I understand that prosecutors have the leeway to do pretty much whatever they want within the law, obviously. But, I mean, is Lamont really that unique an individual in this circumstance?
We used the power of the system, the leverage of the system, to get Lamont services that he really needed.
So the system already has mechanisms in it to do what you want to do. And you use them. In both circumstances, by the way. In one sense, you gave Lamont an alternate path. In the other sense, you reduced the charges on 2 men because you felt sorry for one. So what extra powers are you asking for, or are you advocating for in the criminal justice system if you've already told us that at your discretion, you can employ alternative outcomes?
And by doing that, I think we make the community safer. We make Lamont less likely to go down that path of the guys he was with committing serious crimes, including violent crimes.
Well, did he or didn't he? What is the recidivism rate for kids put through that program versus jail time or probation or whatever? you can't just tell us you think it did. You have to provide us some evidence beyond, because one individual example says nothing about the efficacy of your proposal. What is the recidivism rate for people that you reduced the DUI charges on? What is the recidivism rate for people put through the diversionary program? In aggregate, in percentages, information, data, argument. This is what we need here. Anecdotal evidence is fine. It doesn't tell us whether your theory works.
We make it less likely that there will be victims at Lamont's hands in the future.
Are you sure? How do you know that? Less likely, but not impossible. Well, what is less? Is it 50% less? Is it 2% less? You at some point in your career, you had to argue in front of a jury to prove your case, right? Didn't you? This was your profession, or is your profession, correct? Because you're doing a very poor job here.
Now, Lamont, Carlos, Jeremy, Edwin, these are all real people, and they're all complicated. We as prosecutors would do well to recognize that, but it's hard. Think back to 2002.
2002? Okay, I was getting out of college. Attack of the Clones came out, I think. Something like that. These are all different people, but you've already assessed one of theirs character on the basis of their bank balance. Right. Okay.
Edwin sitting in that car. Do you want Edwin sitting in that car on your street where your kids are playing? Maybe you're the one who goes up to that window, or your loved one is that cop. That discomfort, that uneasiness is why it is always easier to stick to a formula where we have A crime and thus B sentence.
If the cop had been injured, like seriously injured, if the cop had his leg snapped, would addiction have been a reasonable excuse to not prosecute or punish Edwin with jail time? Is just the dumb luck the cop was not more seriously injured the only thing standing between Edwin and a harsher sentence? Is addiction an excuse? Because that's what you've been putting out there. And I don't know the specifics of the Edwin case. I don't know anything else. But if you're going to set the standard of addiction is a reasonable excuse for criminal behavior not deserving of criminal punishment, I don't know if that's a standard you want to set. Although I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that's actually a standard that Seattle has set in recent months. So maybe this talk was foreshadowing the future of Seattle criminal policy.
But that system of A thus B has led us to a place where in King County now, 50% of the kids who come through juvenile detention end up reoffending. And what's the percentage of the kids that were put on diversionary programs? I cannot assess what you just said in relation to what you've been arguing for unless you tell us what percentage were put on diversionary programs and then what percentage of that reoffended. Is that what's coming out of your mouth next? Because I'd appreciate it if it was. Percent of the kids who come through juvenile detention end up reoffending. Where nationally, more than 2/3 of prisoners are rearrested within 3 years of release.
Okay, so you went from the status of juveniles in your local area to nationally criminals at large. But you're not going to tell us what the recidivism rate was for juveniles put on the diversionary program that Lamont was. Why not? If it's so successful, why aren't you bragging about its success?
It's our opportunity as prosecutors to say that this is not enough. This cannot possibly be good enough.
So give everybody slaps on the wrist if there happens to be an illegal immigrant who has the same crime committed on the same day? Or give the guy who has a better job a harsher punishment because he can afford it? What are you advocating for?
A colleague of mine hated the idea that this would be something that we have to take on as prosecutors.
What? Hated? Take on what? What are you talking about?
After all, he said, it's Jeff Sessions that deports them, not us.
That's your concern. That is your concern. Someone having to face the consequences of their own actions in a crime that they've already committed, separate to anything having to do with your office or your jurisdiction. So your purpose as a prosecutor is to help prevent illegal immigrants from being deported. Is that what I'm hearing? Because that's what it sounds like you're saying.
And he's not wrong.
But
Technically.
You're a freaking prosecutor. It's all about the technicality. Okay.
But his point gets us to the uncomfortable reality.
Oh, the uncomfortable reality. Well, I've been told that if I'm uncomfortable, then something's happening that's worthwhile. So tell me about the uncomfortable reality.
The decisions we make have consequences.
You are absolutely right. You know what? I take everything back. Our speaker has, you know what? That fact, that declaration absolves him completely. The decisions we make have consequences. You're correct. You know, dag nabbit, you're right. So Carlos chose to be in the country illegally. People who cross the border without permission have made a choice. And those choices bring with them consequences. Right?
And those consequences disproportionately fall on those that are already worst off in society.
No. It's not about worst off in society. It's about choosing to break the law. They made a choice. The consequences of their choices are not being meted out upon them unfairly. If they are here illegally, their presence here is the crime. If they cross the border, they have committed a crime. The only exception is someone who is a minor child brought across through no thought or will or consent of their own because they're a minor child. I'm fine with the DREAM Act or the tenets thereof. I'm fine with a DACA program being part of law. I'm not happy with how it's been implemented or put into practice, but the overall idea I am totally for because, as far as I'm concerned, those children are innocent victims of their parents' decisions. But outside of that circumstance, a legal adult of sound mind crossing the border is committing a crime. And for every minute that they spend in this country illegally, they are committing a crime. And they are making a choice. And they are accepting the risk that at some point in the future, that Damocles sword is going to come falling down and they'll be deported or otherwise punished. It is unfair that they put that sword above the heads of their families in some instances, innocent children or other people involved who have nothing to do with their decisions, but that's their choice. So now you're going to absolve them of their choices and of the consequences thereof because they're poor or not as well off as Jeremy?
So when we make a decision that it's on its face equal, that has hugely unequal impacts on people's jobs or housing or immigration, even their ability to vote.
That is their fault.
And we get to decide if what we're doing is enough because we're pursuing equality in our narrow lane, or if we recognize, not just as prosecutors, but in this room as powerful people who have an inordinate amount of influence in our society, whether we want to take on more and recognize that we're not just going to amplify the way things are, we're going to try and change the way things are.
So you are an activist prosecutor. In your perfect world, you would mete out harsher punishments to Jeremy because of his relative wealth and lesser punishments to Carlos because of his relative lack of wealth, and more importantly, that he may face harsher consequences for choices he made prior to the crime on the basis of a crime he's already committing, because you don't want to feel guilty that Carlos has to face the consequences of his own actions. You're going to save Carlos from himself because you feel sorry for him. All right.
So when we're wrestling with this idea of equity and equality, this tension that is there in every decision we make in life,
you are infantilizing people on the one hand and vilifying people on the other based on your discretion about how you assess the quality of their lives. Do you not see that?
whether to make the intern pay for donuts instead of the CEO.
That example still does not work.
Whether to give someone that job or that apartment when they're qualified, but have the blemish of a conviction on their record.
A conviction is part of the assessment. A conviction can disqualify you by law in some cases, depending on the circumstances. A conviction is a mark against your merit. It is a choice you made. And whether or not that conviction should be held against someone for the rest of their lives, I am more than happy to discuss. Depending on the circumstances, I don't necessarily think it should. But all the same, it's on your record because it is something that you chose to do. It is a crime you are convicted of. Thank you, Matt Barnes. Activist Prosecutor would be a great title for a bad 1950s radio program. Yeah. Activist Prosecutor. Next time on Johnny Dollar. Anyway.
Whether to make Edwin go to treatment or prison. When we're making these decisions, it is so easy to go back to equality. It's so easy to say, it's the same, so it's fair.
If the crime is the same and there are no extenuating circumstances, you apply the law equally. You had two men committed the same crime with no extenuating circumstances that had anything to do with their personal lives, and you made the assessment to go easy on both because one guy broke federal law You did that. You did that.
And feel okay about that decision. But if every time we asked that question, if every time that we tried to justify something like that, we actually checked ourselves and said, maybe not, maybe the same isn't the right answer here. Maybe we need to treat someone differently because of who they are or what we're trying to achieve.
No. What we're trying to achieve. What are you trying to achieve? Has he given us his mission statement, his personal philosophy, his ideology that's driving him towards all these decisions? What are you trying to achieve? What is your perfect world? I mean, in the case of Jeremy and Carlos, you gave Carlos exactly what you wanted to give him. You reduced the charges and the fines. So Carlos got exactly what you wanted to have happen. But in the other instance, you would have given Jeremy the full DUI and higher fines. Because why? Out of spite. Out of spite. Because you already know Jeremy's character. You already know Jeremy's arrogance because he has a better job than Carlos, obviously. If that's what's driving your decisions, if that's what's driving the change you want to make, you had better check yourself.
If every time we tried to justify something based on that rationale, we all asked ourselves that question and started to pursue equity instead of equality,
then Jeremy would have a DUI conviction and Carlos would just have a moving violation. Also, my pause game is great right now. That's what you would see as fair. You would see that as fair.
We really would have the ability to make more change in these systems that we do have the power to affect.
You gave Carlos a lesser punishment within the bounds of the system. You gave Lamont a diversionary program within the bounds of the system. Edwin got a different opportunity within the bounds of the system. You're not talking about changing the system. You're talking about imposing an ideology. You're talking about applying the system differently to different people who commit the same crime. You didn't do a compare and contrast with Lamont. You didn't do a compare and contrast with Edwin. The core example here, what you did, what you chose to do within the powers of your office between Jeremy and Carlos, you got half of what you wanted out of that equation. So Jeremy would have suffered more because Jeremy has a better job than Carlos. He would have suffered worse charges and higher fines because you assess Jeremy as being deserving of it for his tax bracket. You can gussy this entire talk up with everything else, but it comes down to that core example, that core principle that you just kind of danced around.
Thank you.
Oh, no. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for this. This was very enlightening. I found this very educational. If this is celebrated and or accepted and or promoted thinking in our criminal justice system. Thank you so much. Okay, I got to update the bingo card. There. That's not a new bingo. That's the one we've already awarded. Okay. I'm going to go over the bingo card one more time myself. If there are arguments for squares to be circled, please hold on to them for a moment until after I get through this. Marginalize, marginalization. He did use the phrase something to the effect of the, what was it, the least fortunate among us or something like that. So I'm circling that one. Leaves out vital context. He didn't tell us the efficacy of the diversionary program that he put Lamont on. What's the recidivism rate? What was the effect on the community? Did it or did it not, as a diversionary program option, actually reduce the recurrence of crimes and the people that went through it? He didn't tell us. So I'm circling that one. So hit the card there. Feminism, no. Microaggressions, unconscious bias. He talked a lot about prosecutors just going with this and going with that and all that. And if nothing else, I'll tell you what, even if it wasn't an accusation upon others, our speaker was practicing bias, conscious or otherwise. So I'm just putting it up there, just for the heck of it. Anecdote that probably never happened. I don't have any reason to believe that any of his examples, Edwin, Jeremy, Carlos, Lamont, are fake stories. None of those sounded fake to me. And the fact that especially the Jeremy and Carlos one is so self-indicting, and he admitted to it to a certain extent, but not in the way that he probably should have, I believe it. Diversity and inclusion. Nope, never came up. Attempt to coin new buzzword, buzz phrase. No, not really. Yeah, no. Plays victim. No. Thank you, Andrew James. No, thank you. Yeah, no, thank you. No, thank you. Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Patriarchy, no. Privilege. There was an implication about privilege and power and that kind of thing. He didn't say it. But I'm going to circle it because he looked out at everybody, the people with the power, et cetera, to make these decisions, et cetera. So I'm going to circle that one. That's more of an aggregate thing in my mind. Self-vilification or wretchedness. Yeah. When he talked about how he wished he hadn't done this and a prosecutor like me, and I wish I'd made a different choice, or I was sorry I made that choice about Carlos and Jeremy. If I'd had my druthers, I would have given Jeremy a worse situation or something. Yeah, no, I'm circling that one. Make something about race, sex, etc. for no reason. He didn't bring up race, really. I mean, he mentioned race at the beginning, but it was never a part of his examples or argumentation. He talked mostly about class. Make something about, well, he made it about class for no reason. The adjudication of prosecuting those two crimes, he brought up class where it was completely irrelevant. Completely irrelevant. It had nothing to do with anything. He made it about something. He tried to, but it didn't land. And I don't accept his logic on it either. And white supremacy. He never brought up, again, he never really brought up race as an argument for his talk or for his points. So I can't circle that one as far as I can tell. So that's where the bingo card is, guys. If you have arguments for any squares to be circled, put them in the chat now, and then we'll wrap this up in a couple of minutes. A scanner Daphne, scribe like the prosecutor saying it was Sessions' job to deport him. I do not believe it. Well, it is Sessions' job. It is a federal crime. It's not up to local authorities to deport people. That's a federal process. So, I mean, literally Jeff Sessions' problem? No, but it's the Justice Department of the United States federal crime. So technically, Jeff Sessions representing the government, the federal government. Will it forge? Race 2 with Carlos being a legal immigrant, with Jeremy being not. Well, I don't know. He never brought it up. All he brought up was their immigration status, I guess, or whatever. Actually, Jeremy's didn't matter because I guess he was just, well, you know, a legal citizen, but that's not race. Illegal immigration status does not equate to race, but either way. Thank you, Mike R. Sorry, my brain's going all over the place. But now Mike R says, paying for a nicer jail anecdote. Also, could this be a contender for third WTF award? You make a good point. I mean, everything else aside, bingos or otherwise, this guy's reality or his argument for what counts as justice, fairness, equality, standing up on that stage like he's got some virtuous idea and then dancing around the fact that he would have adjudicated someone more guilty and worthy of more punishment based on their class, and as someone else as less guilty based on their immigration status. I'll think about that one for a second, but you might be onto something. Assassin of the Gray, the two-tier justice system he promotes is about race and class for no reason. The law must not discriminate. Ideally, yes. And I've already circled make something about race, sex, and for no reason. So we're already there, but yeah. Let's see. Mike Savage says, I vote for a WTF on this one. I mean, I did have my moments during this one, didn't I? Especially when it came down to that decisions have consequences. Remember that part? I remember that part. Pepperidge Farms remembers that part. Let's see. Willett Forge could have sworn he mentioned Jay's race, not just being rich executives. Square is circled either way. So, yeah. Mr. Tickle Trunk, the entire talk was him going against the idea behind the entire justice system. Justice is blind. Yeah. Renovatio, he never brought up race, so no circle, but you have to wonder if Jeremy was black, how this would have indoctrinated. How would this now indoctrinating goon alter his stance? He picked Jeremy as a mainly white name, in my honest opinion. Like I say, he never brought it up, so I can't make that part of my consideration. But even though I don't see any other circles being squared at this point, honestly, for everything that preceded it to where he suddenly says decisions have consequences, I gotta say.
What? What is that? What the fuck is that?
Yeah, you know, you're right. This is the third WTF award. To have such a intricate, complex, accredited individual standing on a stage, saying all these things, giving such examples that completely indict him as being an unjust prosecutor at heart, to cite someone's immigration status as something to rest pity on, and then castigate prosecutors for the consequences of their decisions. Yeah, this is a WTF one. This is the third winner of the WTF award. Also a double bingo. So, hey, it's a distinction that doesn't often happen here. And I think with that, guys, we're going to wrap this one up. I need a breather, mentally and otherwise. And I think we all could use one after this. This has been something else. And again, having seen this, having listened to our speaker here, I think this would put the documentary, the most recent documentary about what's going on in Seattle, in a much more highlighted light, enhanced light. I don't know. My brain's going three different directions between the content and the pepper jack. So thank you, Puddock. Add him saying, who would have a TED Talk to ask for less equality to the intro? That sums up this entire series. Oh, man. That was something, wasn't it? I mean, who would have a TEDx talk talking about for less equality? Oh, you cad. Everyone, I'm going to call that there. Thank you guys so much for joining me for this one. This really was a group endeavor. Thank you so much for your attendance. Thank you so much for your participation and argumentation. Thank you so much for your generosity. I really do appreciate it. If you would like to hear more from me or Satsu 2 Cents or the Ranting Monkey, you can find all three of us tonight on the Ranting Monkeys channel at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for The Lords of the Night, where we will talk about the news of the day, news stories you submit, what we've been up to on the internet, and then your questions and comments. Everyone, I hope you all have a good rest of your Saturday, a good rest of your weekend. I hope you are all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon. And I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.